Jack, when you have a bunch of Toastmasters in a cabin, they're getting restless, do they prattle?
Yes.
Our first speaker tonight is Lloyd. His introduction is, by this time in our lives, we've all learned that we're constantly faced with contradictions. Some of the activities that are most fun are also the most dangerous. Some of the foods that taste the best are also the worst for our health. And some of the things that are supposed to keep us safe can put us in extreme danger. In Project 4, a fact-finding report from the Advanced Communicator Manual, Speaking to Inform, Lloyd will discuss something that was supposed to keep us safe very nearly resulted in what could have been the greatest catastrophe in history. And what we need to know to prevent a similar event. Please welcome Lloyd Smith and Broken Arrow.
At 8 o'clock at night on the evening of January 24th, 1961, a B-52 bomber took off from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base near Goldsboro, North Carolina. It was carrying 8 crew members, and they were engaged in a normal training flight. For the next 4 hours, they flew around and practiced bombing runs and avoidance maneuvers and so on. And at about midnight, they rendezvoused with an aerial tanker for refueling. At that point, the crews of both planes noticed that there was a serious fuel leak coming out of the bomber's right wing. So the ground controllers at the Air Force Base ordered the plane to fly back to the base and make an emergency landing immediately. On their final approach to the base, though, the plane became uncontrollable and the commander ordered everybody to bail out. Of the 8 crewmen, 5 of them bailed out successfully and landed without injury. 1 of them was killed bailing out and the other 2 never made it off the plane. At about 1,000 feet altitude, the plane broke apart in midair, scattering debris over about 5 square miles of farm fields just outside of the Air Force Base. Now, that's a tragedy, obviously, and all of us know that military service, and particularly military aviation, can be hazardous, and that's what happened in this case. However, there was a special circumstance here. When that plane broke apart, 2 Mark 39 hydrogen bombs fell out of the sky and landed in that farm field. Those bombs had 4 megaton yield. A megaton is the equivalent of 1,000,000 tons of TNT, or 8 billion pounds of TNT. That is more than the total of all of the weapons exploded in warfare in human history in that single bomb. Now, obviously, the Air Force got pretty excited about the 2 hydrogen bombs landing in a farm field after the plane crash, and within a very short time, technicians were on the scene to recover them. One of the bombs hit the ground at full speed and was smashed to pieces. What's called the pit of the bomb, the part that contains the plutonium, uranium, and tritium and deuterium. These are hydrogen bombs, had a bunch of stuff in it. Anyway, ended up about 200 feet burrowed into the ground. Very soft, plowed soil with an underground spring. The technicians gathered up all the bits and pieces that they could, but they couldn't get to that part buried below ground, so they filled the hole with concrete, and to this day there's a giant cement plug in that farm field covering up that bomb. It'll be there till the end of time, but some will be radioactive till the end of time too, so it's a good thing, I guess. Now, the other bomb was a different story. It was found hanging in a tree by its parachute shrouds. Hydrogen bombs have parachutes on them because they're designed to explode in air so that it creates a larger blast zone than if it exploded on the ground. You get a small blast that would go up. In the air, you get a big blast that goes down. Unfortunately, the parachute mechanism was the first of the 4 triggering mechanisms for the weapon, and it activated. When the technicians took the covers off the bomb in order to make sure everything was okay, they found out that the 2nd and 3rd triggering mechanisms had also activated. The only thing that stood between a nuclear blast and safety was a single switch, electrical switch. It was worth about $8. Now, as you can imagine, people were pretty excited about that too. Had that bomb gone off, it would have obliterated the Air Force Base and the city of Goldsboro, North Carolina, in a flash of heat and light that would have been 3 times as hot as the surface of the sun. Would have killed about 75,000 people instantly. It also would have done serious blast damage as far away as 50 miles, and that would have covered the city of Raleigh, North Carolina. They estimate another 25,000 people would have been killed there. The fallout from the bomb would have drifted northeasterly, right up the Atlantic coast. The cities of Norfolk, Virginia, Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Boston, New York, all would have had serious fallout. They estimate another 100,000 people would have died fairly soon of the radiation sickness from the fallout, and another 50 to 100,000 would have developed cancer and died of it in their lifetimes. It would have been by far the most serious catastrophe in American history. Now what happened? Well, it turns out there are a couple things that most people don't know. One of them is that nuclear weapons wear out just sitting there. They degrade just sitting on the missiles or sitting inside the bombs. The reason for that is the radiation that's inherent to nuclear weapons. It degrades electrical circuits, it makes metal brittle. There are several other things that happen. But those bombs need to be constantly re-engineered and rebuilt, and that's what they are. And this bomb had not. This is how they discovered that this was a problem. Now, the other thing that happened, or that most people don't realize, is that, and this is the part where I'm issuing the call to action, or what you can do about this, is that most people don't know that the military has possession of our nuclear weapons, and they operate our nuclear weapons, but they don't own them. Our nuclear weapons are designed, built, and owned by a civilian agency, the U.S. Department of Energy. That's why the Department of Energy was created in the first place, was to oversee our nuclear weapons. All the other stuff, solar energy, all that stuff, was just given to them later. And now, there's a reason for that. The U.S. has a system where the military has civilian control, and this is part of it. This is why the U.S. Department of Energy's appropriation is so important. Now, about 4 or 5 months ago, President Obama signed a bill that had passed Congress that would have started the next rebuild of America's nuclear arsenal, re-engineering and rebuilding all of those weapons. During the campaign, when Donald Trump was a candidate, he said that was a perfect example of wasteful government spending, and he intended to eliminate it. Well, he can, but there is a consequence to not rebuilding those weapons. It's also important that the officials of the Department of Energy know what they're doing. Now, President Obama's 2 secretaries of energy were both PhD nuclear physicists. One of them, Daniel Chu, was a Nobel Prize-winning nuclear physicist. President Trump's nominee for Secretary of Energy is former Governor Rick Perry of Texas, who took 1 science class in college, beginning chemistry, where he got a C-. Now, at his hearing last week, his hearing before the Senate, he apparently did not know that the department he was going to head controls all of our nuclear weapons. The lesson in this is this. We need to watch over this to make sure, because these nuclear weapons are our protective shield. They, in a very real sense, they have kept us safe for decades, but they need constant, expensive maintenance, or bad things can happen. Okay, so if there are any questions?
How did you come upon the story?
I saw it in I subscribed to a bunch of oddball online news things, and it was called the Goldsboro Incident, where the east coast of the U.S. was nearly destroyed. I thought, I've never heard of that, so I did some research.
Where is Perry's nomination? Where's his confirmation?
Where is it in the process?
Yeah.
He's had his hearing before whatever committee it is that would approve him, and so the committee needs to vote, and then the full Senate needs to vote. He is likely to pass. It would be very unusual if he did not, because the Republicans control the Senate. It'd be pretty unusual if they voted down the presidential appointment to a cabinet position.
Do you know why they didn't go dig that core out of the ground? I know it's
Bob.
200 feet, but we can certainly dig 200 feet.
It turned out, well, yeah, but it turned out there was an underground spring, so the ground they couldn't pump the water out in order to dig. It just kept filling in, and they figured it would be just as safe to fill the 200-foot hole with cement, cap it off, and create a big plug as what they wanted us to. So far, so good. Nothing bad is that.
Why is it that they have the bombs on the planes to begin with when they're just doing maneuvers?
At that time, back in 1961, that was considered a normal thing. I mean, regular bombers flew with bombs too. Until very recently, all of the B-52s, when they took off, flew fully armed. The year I was on sabbatical leave doing my master's degree in Eastern, every morning I would see the B-52s taking off from Fairchild Air Force Base as I went along I-90, heading for Cheney. And they had little white tubes under their wings. Those tubes were air-launched cruise missiles that had hydrogen bombs on them. And in the afternoon, I'd see them coming back into the base. The crews have to train realistically, or if there were ever a time when they needed to use the weapons, they might not be able to do it.
How are those 4 triggers triggered? Is it remote?
Electronically, yeah. Barometric pressure starts the first one, and I'm not sure about the rest of them. But there's some kind of electronic thing. They were supposed to be fail-safe, and luckily the last one held.
Thank God.
Wow. Do you know what the distribution of nuclear weapons is around the country?
Well,
and the number of them?
Yeah, starting with the Reagan administration, the START treaty, Strategic Arms Reduction talk, and then there have been SALT, and there are several other acronyms. The U.S. and Russia agreed to shrink down the number of weapons. At one point, we had about 13,000 bombs and warheads, nuclear bombs and warheads. Russia had about 15,000. We didn't need as many because ours are much more accurate than the Russian ones were, so they could be pinpointed on their targets. Now we're down, the U.S. has about, I think it's 1,100, and the Russians have about 1,300. They're, ours are much superior weapons. They're better engineered, better built.
What do they do with expired ones?
They take them apart.
Oh, okay.
They dismantle them.
Okay.
That's kind of tricky work.
They recycle them.
Yeah, that's actually it. They recycle them. A bunch of the radioactive parts in the nuclear bombs have ended up being converted into fuel for nuclear reactors.
Oh, by that I meant they recycle them in the weapons.
Oh, yeah,
The
right.
tritium all comes out, the plutonium's
Right.
reprocessed.
Yeah. Yeah, we have somebody who has some expertise with this because he worked on the Hanford projects. But
So they're refreshed, in other words.
Refreshed,
yes,
They're refreshed.
reused.
Yeah.
that's actually what I was talking about. These bombs have to continuously be re-engineered, remanufactured because they wear out just sitting there. It sounds unlikely,
Yeah.
but that's...
I thought the half-life would be a lot longer.
Well, the half-life of the
Well, it is.
nuclear
It's
material is...
there's some isotope plutonium that decays into americium, which makes it too hot to work on.
Yeah, and it can make metal
I see.
brittle, it degrades
Yeah.
electronic circuits and all kinds of things. And that's what happened in this case, but nobody knew that it was going to happen until this. I know we're out of time, but one thing I let us off the speech, about a year later, a Air Force crew that was practicing in a silo, a missile silo right next to Little Rock, Arkansas, a crewman dropped a socket wrench and it ricocheted down the wall of the silo and poked a hole in the side of this Titan II missile. Well, Titan IIs were highly pressurized missiles, liquid fuel missiles, very dangerous things. Vapor started coming out. The stuff is toxic, so the crew evacuated the silo. Everybody's standing around trying to figure out what the hell to do, and the silo filled up with the vapor and an electrical spark set it off. It popped this 25-ton cement lid off the top of the silo, and the nuclear warhead flew 500 yards and landed in a farm field in the middle of a rainstorm. It took 3 days to find it. This nuclear warhead was sitting out there totally somewhere for 3 whole days. That one, the four arming mechanisms, 2 of them triggered, the other 2 did not.
I have one last question.
Lucky
The
to be
title
alive.
of this is Broken Arrow.
Oh yeah, I didn't have time to explain. That's the military code word for a nuclear accident, like this one. There have been 55 of them since they started the nuclear weapons era.
Wow.
So far, so good. Mr. Toastmaster.
Timer, would you please give us 1 minute and write down comments
Sure.
about citizens?
Start.